There we go. Thank you for that. So the credits that you do have as a producer and the screenwriter tend towards horror, right?
Yeah.
Is that your genre of predilection? Like how did that come about? Is that something that comes naturally to you, or?
Um, a couple things on that. I like the answer is yes. Like when I first fell in love with movies, it was in the I was, I was 14 or 15, like most people, I think, when that starts to happen. Or at least that was true back then because we didn't have streaming services coming right into our homes. So I first started to fall in love with movies when video stores and I could go rent VHS tapes was the thing. And I don't know how many of you know the history of the distribution business, but basically home video did not exist, and then all of a sudden it was extraordinarily popular. It ramped up super duper fast. So there was a need in that industry for content. There was like, there's only so many movies, there's only so many videos of them, and it's like we need a lot of movies fast to fulfill the demand for movies. And so where they got those movies quite typically were like B movies, exploitation movies, horror movies. And so I would go to my local neighborhood video store and just some days I'd be able to get the new releases that were the big movies, but quite often by the time I got there on Friday, the good ones had been taken. So I would just grab whatever I possibly could. And so it was always like, just splatter movies and horror movies that maybe were, anything from Trauma, anything Roger Corman produced, these really like low budget movies that quite frequently were in the horror area. And so I have a love for it. The other thing is, but I mean, if I had to pick right now, by and large, my taste run toward like action movies more so than horror movies, but I'd never have the budget to write 5 cars crashing into each other or, Fast and the Furious 10. I mean, I'll be the first one to see Fast and Furious 10 when it comes out, but I can't write or produce it. So there's that with the horror, is my history with it and my love for it. But also, I tend to be kind of a funny person in my personality, and it's my belief, but I'm not saying this as an opinion. I'm not breaking any new ground here. I think it's just clearly true that horror and comedy are cousins. They are the same, really. Both have the same sort of rhythm, and they have the same sort of structure, and it's about sort of a sudden surprise that either makes you jump out of your seat or makes you laugh, like have some sort of an emotional expulsion. So like that build emotion, build emotion is something that I think that I naturally gravitate towards just because of my personality and also my love of horror movies. And I think you'll find that, I mean, the movies that I am going back to, my wife and I are doing, like, we're watching a horror movie every night because it's Halloween time. And, and the ones I choose are always something like Slither by James Gunn, which is funny and scary, or Return of the Living Dead, which is scary and funny, and even Scream, that kind of thing. So I tend to gravitate towards the horror movies that are also really funny and don't take themselves too terribly seriously. Stay away from that torture porn stuff. I'm not really a big fan of the stuff that is just makes me feel like I need a shower afterwards. But stuff that is actually well told, or I mean, it can be creepy. David Cronenberg, I mean, that guy, his horror movies, man, you watch them and like The Fly, when he's turning into the Fly, or Videodrome, where the TV is sort of like it's breathing, or even Crash, which isn't a horror movie, but which does a lot of imagery of violence and sex at the same time. They can make you feel very uncomfortable and squirmy, and that's fine. I just don't like the stuff which is just about watching somebody in pain. That's just not my thing.
Cool. So I was just telling the guys as well that we obviously know each other from the London Screenwriters Festival, and that you are the pitch guru there, pitching guru. what is pitching about? How did you start? Obviously, you know, doing
Well,
it and then
yeah.
teaching it.
Well, you know, oh, geez, when was it? It must have been 20 years ago now. I was trying to make it as a writer, just like everybody else, and went to a conference in LA, the screenwriting something, I don't remember, that was put on by Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and they had a what amounts to a little pitching event there, where you got 5-minute meetings with everybody, and went there a couple times and caught on with another event that was just starting up that was all about the pitching also. And so for the last 20 years or so, I've been not only running events, but in my role as a writer, been pitching, and in my role as a producer, hearing pitches. And I just sort of, Malcolm Gladwell says, anything you do for 10,000 hours, you become an expert in. So I sort of became an expert in it by experiencing it from all sides and talking to, like, while I'm booking executives to hear pitches, I would ask them what works. What should I tell the people to do? I don't want to waste your time. This executive is going to be sitting there for an hour hearing people pitch them. So if I can give advice to the pitchers, what can you do? It's going to make the executive's experience better. And so it's just, I've absorbed all these things over the years about keep it super duper short, and like, there's no such thing as too short. My second most successful pitch I have ever had in my life was 10 words long. The most successful pitch was 1 word long. So it's not a question of trying to tell your whole story, your whole script in a 2 minutes time. It's about just getting the person you're pitching to interested enough to want to know more. The goal of a pitch meeting is to get the second meeting, and if you are not interesting or boring, or you try to cram too much in, or you're difficult to comprehend or understand verbally, I don't mean like you don't speak clearly. What I mean is you try to say so much stuff that people lose track of what you're talking about. Then it's going to come down to, then the next time you have a meeting, it's going to be suddenly mysteriously canceled, or it's going to be one of those things where the executive tells his assistant, in 90 seconds, call me with an emergency call so I can end this meeting. It happens just because it's like, it becomes, pitching is so much less about the script you write and so much more about whether or not you're a person someone wants to spend some time with.
Right. I love that, because like, how do you even pitch a story in 1 word? Like, I guess everything, do you tell, like, when you teach or when you sort of share tips with people, do you actually go into, like, it's about selling yourself as well, and like, what, as you just said, like, are you someone that people want to invest time in? How do you do that? Like,
I do try to teach that, and what's hard is, I think what's hard is that a lot of people put such a huge amount of emotional pressure on the word pitch. And I don't know what that is. If it's just you feel like you're giving a performance and it feels like stage fright, or if you just worry that if this goes wrong, my entire career is ruined. Or
I'm not worth it. It comes down to I'm not worth it, doesn't it?
Yeah, or you're worried that they're going to confirm what you think already, which is that you're not good enough.
Right.
And what happens often in these meetings, in these things where I teach people, is, very often, not very often, always, pitching is part of a larger conversation right there in the moment, right? So it's not like you walk into the room or turn on Zoom and immediately go, here's what I got for you. I got 2 warthogs wearing a trench coat and they break into a bank. It's you don't do that. You say, hi, I'm Bob. Hey, I'm Charlie. How's it going? Yeah, good. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Chicago. Okay, go Cubs. Whatever. Oh, I was Chicago one time. I had this fantastic piece of pizza. Oh, you're from New York. We're pizza rivals, Chicago and New York.
Right.
So we have like a little conversation, getting to know you for a bit, and then eventually either the exec will say, tell me what you're working on, or you will say, let me tell you what I'm working on, and then you then you go into it, right? So the less you have to say about your script, first of all, the less there is for you to screw up. And secondly, yeah, and like, I don't recommend memorizing your pitch either. You know, It's just be able to talk about it the same way that, look, I mean, what I watched Slither last night, you know, but no one would want to talk about that. But if someone says, "What are you watching?" I'll say, "Oh man, I've been hearing a lot about it, so I finally watched Squid Game." You know, and they'll be like, "Oh, what'd you think?" And I'll be able to talk about it, you know, and I can talk to you about Squid Game. Anyone in this room, I can talk to you about Squid Game like a human being talking to another human being. You know, I think it's cool, and here's why. I think it didn't work in these ways, whatever. And you need to be able to talk about your script in the same way, your script in the same way. The only difference is Squid Game's gotten made and yours hasn't yet. But what I find happens a lot of the time in these either in-person courses or online is I say, you know, so I get somebody engaged in a conversation and say, "Hey, Maureen, how's it going?" And you say, "Yeah, good. You know, things are okay. I've been really busy lately. It's raining outside." "Oh, yeah, I know. What do you think? You know, football's restarted." "Yeah, who's your team?" "It's great. Okay. What are you watching?" "I'm watching Squid Game." "That's cool. Okay. So let me tell me about your script." "My script is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and what it is about, and what happens when a boy," and it's like all of a sudden they go into this like boring, stilted, over-rehearsed, dry thing. The point where you're supposed to be most excited becomes the part where you're most nervous, and so you sort of lean on that crutch. And the reality is, when I said to people, "I got something for you, vampires in Alaska," and they go, and I'd say 6 Months of Darkness. And they'd go, "Ah," and I'd say, "It's called Frostbite." They would say, "I want to know more about that." And we'd engage me in conversation. That was 10 words, right? And then what happens after that is they start asking you questions about your story, which first of all is great because that means you have them interested. And secondly, the secret is that when they're asking you specific questions, what they're really telling you is what is important to them, right? So instead of having one pitch that you try to fit everybody into that box, you are allowing the person to ask questions that tell you what's important to them. If you were to say to me, "I have a Vampires in Alaska script," I'd be like, you know, "Tell me about some of the gory scenes. You know, tell me about tell me about like the history of these vampires. What are the vampire rules of this one? Do they glitter? You know, and then I can tell you the story." Somebody else might say, "Tell me about the female lead. Maybe they have an actress in mind who they want to send a horror script to." Someone might say, "What's the budget going to be like?" Someone might say, "Do you know somebody in Alaska so we can, you know, find locations?" You know, whatever it is, the questions you're going to get will be as different as the number of people who exist in the world. Everybody has different priorities. Somebody might be listening to a pitch because they want to bring it to their boss. Somebody might want to listen to a pitch because they know somebody else who might like it. Somebody might want to hear a pitch because they're thinking about, "I'm going to leave the company I'm in now and sort of hang up my own shingle, and I need a slate of movies to produce, and will this fit in or not?" You don't know what those are going to be, what those priorities are going to be. So it becomes better to be educated on your script and in storytelling and on the industry as a whole than it is to just memorize 3-minute speech about what's in your story. And if you forget something, then you all of a sudden you trip and you go back to, "Oh, I forgot to tell you this other thing," and whatever. And the person's just like checking his watch, seeing when it's time to go. So just pitching is much more about comfort, about personality, and about being able to speak intelligently about not only your stories in general, and the state of the industry as a whole. If I said I watched Squid Game and any of you here behind your screens didn't know what I was talking about, it's time to start reading the trades every single day. Squid Game is literally the biggest program that has ever been on Netflix ever, bar none, and it's out right now. And it's out of Korea. So if you've never heard of it, it's because you're not showing the respect to the industry to understand what people in the industry are paying attention to. It might not be your bag. You might not want to watch it, but you at least need to be educated enough in it that you can speak about it. Because I'll tell you what, there's not a single industry professional in the entire world who does not want something that somebody says 500 million people watch this. And so you need to be able to respect, even if you're saying, "I want to make this little drama that's very important to me, and it has important themes and character arcs and symbolism and everything. That's great. I think that's awesome. I think as writers, that's the stuff, that's what we trade in. But now, instead of being on your own, writing by yourself, you are moving into the most team player oriented industry in the world. Sit and watch anything. When we're done here today, just turn on Netflix and go to the end and watch the credits. It only takes about 5,000 people to make a movie. And you need to, and you're used to thinking of your movie as you sitting behind your keyboard, but in reality, it takes that many people all marching in the same direction, and you need to be one of the leaders on that. You're going to be in charge of the story. So I think I might have strayed from your question.
No, but I love that, because it puts the business in film business, and that's also what it's about. It's about money and selling. If
you're going to ask somebody, hey, I have this movie and it's only going to cost $50,000 to make, which is a cheap movie, then basically you're saying, hey, buddy, I want you to give me $50,000. And anyone who's willing to give you $50,000 is going to ask, how do I get back $50,001?
Yeah.
So if you're going to say it's really not going to be that popular with a lot of people, that's going to be a difficult sell, is all I'm saying.
No, thanks for that. I think I always love hearing someone talk about that side, because I think when you're creative and it could be, you're in your mind a lot, and it becomes very much about your process of creation as opposed to what it is that people want to see, and what the market is like.
I'm not saying you should not be creative, and you should not
I get that.
And make it fully your own voice. You totally should. It's just when it comes time to talk about this thing that you've created that has your heart and soul sunk into it, when you're going out and talking about it with people in an effort to sort of build your team around it, it really behooves you to be ready for whatever direction that conversation is going to take.
And to know where your style fits as well. Like, I know I haven't pitched as much as you, but I pitched a few things, and I feel like I was always being drawn towards, like, it's Chocolat meets Bridget Jones, or, it's like people want to know, or to be able to, you need to be able to convey where you sort of fit, and that, what other movie is like that out there that you could, that did make money, that you can sort of emulate. And even if it's not exactly that, like, at least it gives people like a ballpark for something that only exists in your head at the moment.
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to do comps in your pitch, comps, like, comparatives, whatever. If you're going to do comps in your pitch, that's fine. That's a great shorthand for people to sort of know what they're expecting. But two pieces of advice on that. First of all, make sure that the comps you choose are movies that were creatively successful, financially successful, and beloved. And secondly, be ready to answer the question, how is it like that?
Yeah.
If you say it's like Chocolat meets Bridget Jones's Diary, those are great comps. But then if I say, in what ways is it like Chocolat? You're like, well, I want Johnny Depp to be in it. That's not the right answer. I mean, whether you want him to be or not, it's the story or the tone or the location or something needs to be like it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I've got two questions for you. The first one is, in your years at the LSF, you interviewed a lot of like Oscar winners and people, is there anyone that stuck with you and gave you one particular piece of advice, or just, one talk that really sort of inspired you, and why?
I'll give you a couple. I interviewed Joel Schumacher, who directed The Lost Boys and so on, and he has since died, which is very sad to me. But there were two things that I took from him that were great. First of all, some of you may or may not know that Joel Schumacher also made the George Clooney Batman movie, the much hated George Clooney Batman movie, and one of the things that fans of Batman hate particularly about that movie is that there are nipples on the Batsuit, and so we were doing the interview and we turned to the audience for Q&A, and somebody raised their hand and got the mic and said, "Why did you put nipples on the Batsuit?" Right? And Joel Schumacher gave this answer, which sticks with me forever, which is, do you really want the answer to that, or are you just trying to look cool in front of your friends? And the person slunk away. Like who? It's like, you know, it's so the lesson I took from that is in an industry where there's so much ass kissing, it's okay to stand up for yourself and call somebody out on their shit. It's all right. You know, there's no reason to sort of allow yourself to be victimized by somebody else who's just trying to serve their own ego. I think that's a very valuable lesson. The other thing he taught me is, you know, we got chatting about, this was not on stage, although, this was not on stage, but I'll tell you a third thing. This was not on stage, but we got chatting about, like, I had been in negotiations with somebody on a script, and then they decided to walk away, and I was feeling very betrayed and hurt, and so on. And he told me that he said these words, and it was a valuable lesson I try to remind myself all the time, which is forgiveness is an act of strength. Wow. You know, it's like very often in this industry and in the world, you'll come to blows with somebody metaphorically, and then they have to re-enter your life in some way. For a big business, filmmaking is a very small town, and you're going to find yourself like at the same. If I make a movie and you make a movie, and when we're doing the festival circuits, we're bound to run into each other 6 times. You know, it's like we're together in Austin, then we go separate ways, and we come back and we see each other again at, you know, New York Film Festival, London, whatever. And so if someone's a jerk to you, forgiveness is an act of strength that allows you to sort of become stronger. Something else though that happened with Joel, which is a reverse lesson, something not to do to people, is so before we went on stage to do an interview, I said to him, you know, I talked to him a little bit, said, here's what it's going to be like, here's what it's going to be about, whatever, got familiar with each other. And then I said to him, now, this is the last question I ask everybody I interview. He was like my 3rd interview of my life, but this is everybody I ever interview. I tried to make myself seem like a big shot. And I said, is there anything you do not want to talk about? What is off limits? I will avoid anything you want me to avoid. And he said, no, man, I'm an open book. It's cool. Anything's good. Anything's fine. And so I said, okay, great. And I asked him again right before we went on, like standing backstage being introduced, like nothing, right? Everything's okay. He's like, yep, no problem. So we went on stage, sat down, and I said, you know, Joel Schumacher, blah, 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 do the intro. And then I said, so you started in your film career on the movie Car Wash. And he went, I don't want to talk about Car Wash. I asked you twice. And my first question.
Oh dear.
And first of all, Car Wash is a dope movie. You should definitely see it. But don't do that to people. I'm not, like, I only find out when I'm on stage that I'm not wearing any pants. It's like literally my worst nightmare. So don't do that to people. It's like if once you get something made, or somewhat, if you're doing press, or if you have a meeting with an agent or a manager, or if you're negotiating or a lawyer, with anything else, be direct. You know, say to your agent, this is what's important to me, that this character stays this way, or this is what's important to me, that I retain the character rights so that I get right of first refusal on a sequel if there ever is one. Like, without people on your team knowing what it is you prioritize, they will not necessarily prioritize those things. They might try to talk you out of it, but ultimately you're the boss, so make sure that happens. The second guy who made a real impact on me was Dave Reynolds. He wrote Finding Nemo. He wrote The Emperor's New Groove. And we're friends now. Like, we send each other texts of funny things that happen all the time. But he before doing those jobs, he worked as a staff writer on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, a late night chat show, where, you know, the American structure of late night chat shows is, it starts, I don't know if it's true here as much, but the structure is that they start every night with a monologue. The host comes out, does like 7 or 8 minutes of jokes, and then they carry on to the rest of the show. So every day, the writing staff had to write an 8-minute comedy set, a funny 8-minute comedy set, and then after that day was done, they had to go out and do it again the next day. So they start every day reading the newspaper and talking about the news of the day. What he taught me is the importance of, when you're writing in terms of craft, the ability to write in the voice of somebody else. Okay, he had to write jokes not the way Dave Reynolds would say them. He had to write jokes the way Conan O'Brien would say them in Conan O'Brien's comedy, philosophy and comedy style. And the same thing happened on Finding Nemo, where William H. Macy was cast as Marlin first. They wrote jokes and it was kind of funny, and it wasn't really working. So they had to fire Macy and bring in Albert Brooks, who plays him in the movie we all know and love. But Albert Brooks is funny in a completely different way. So you had to be able to immediately switch gears and write for the voice of the person who's going to be speaking your words. That's so important when you're writing characters. I took that and put it into my thing. And insofar as if your story has a proper amount of friction, a proper amount of drama, conflict, then there's bound to be somebody in it who represents a position that you do not agree with, that you personally do not agree with. You need to put words in the mouth of a character that you personally find distasteful or reprehensible or morally wrong or whatever. And if you can do that effectively, right, in another person's voice, then the script is going to necessarily be better. It is going to be a chemical reaction that is like when they put Mentos in Diet Coke and it goes all over the place. You want that chemical reaction from your drama, not just you pour salt and water and stir it and now it's just salty water. Because scripting to be exciting and emotionally engaging and powerful, and you can only do that by having people who are in opposition to your belief system, who speak intelligently and speak well and are often very interesting or charismatic. So the ability to sort of put yourself in someone else's shoes and say, how would this person who I don't believe the same as say this, is a very, very valuable skill. And it's very difficult to do because basically just writing the words, you're thinking, oh man, I don't want to make this too convincing or someone else might buy it. But someone else might buy into it. But the reality is, the more difficult it is for your hero to overcome any of these obstacles or any of these conflicts that happen, the stronger your hero becomes. You can't make it easy on your hero. You got to chase your hero up a tree and throw rocks at your hero, and then when they fall out of the tree, walk over and kick them in the ribs a few times. It's hard because it's the character that we tend to like the most is our heroes, and our job as writers is to torture those poor people. But that's a story, baby.
I love that, and you kind of answered my next question, which was very specifically going to be, what makes a good story?
All conflict.
The conflict.
All conflict makes a good story. You need to find sources of conflict anywhere you can, even in scenes where characters agree with each other. Okay, if you have a scene where one character is all their dialogue reads like this. Okay, yeah, you're right. Yep, I understand. Yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, I get it. Like, if then that is a bad scene. Even if you need to have exposition, you need all this stuff, all this information dumped on your audience, you still need to have some sort of conflict in there. It's better to have a scene. If you have a scene where two people are sitting over coffee and it's like, yes, I agree, that's fine. It's better even just to have them in a courtroom where they're being interrogated by somebody, something where there's some source of conflict. But even if they do agree with each other, you can give them different motivations. There's a scene in Star Wars where they've been captured on the Death Star, but they managed to escape immediate capture. They're all hiding out in a room, and they find out that the princess is being held captive there too. So now it's about, we got to go save the princess. Now, eventually Han Solo is turned to the thing of, yes, we need to save the princess. But Han Solo wants to save the princess because he wants the reward. Luke Skywalker wants to save the princess because he just doesn't want her to be executed. So even though they want the same thing, they want it for different reasons. That one is revelatory of each of their character, and secondly, allows them to have conflicts later on too. They're going to execute her, better her than me, but she's rich. Oh, wait, hang on, she's rich. It's better to have scenes where people are in conflict with each other. Maybe one can be convinced, maybe the other one can be, in which case there's a victory there, but there needs to be change and there needs to be alteration. The bottom line is this: what makes a good story is conflict and lack of flab in your story. Like, you don't want excessive stuff in there. If you can take any scene in your script and pop it out and the story doesn't change, then that scene has got to go, even if you love that scene. If that scene is your darling, there's a reason they say kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings. Yes.
You need it's basically, you can go through every scene and just make little notes to yourself. Here's the status of the story at the beginning of the scene. Here's the status of the story at the end of the scene. And they better be different. The beginning of the scene, the character's alive. At the end of the scene, the character's dead. At the beginning of the scene, the character doesn't know what's going on. At the end of the scene, the character has discovered the murderer, the identity of the murderer. At the beginning of the scene, Apollo 13 is off course. At the end of the scene, Apollo 13 is back on course, right? There needs to be some sort of change in condition of the story after every single scene. Everyone, without exception, no doubt.
Wow. Okay, then. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I've got one last question, which is